You don't need a battlefield to wage a war anymore. You only need winter. You only need darkness. You only need to turn off the heat. Imagine this. You wake up before sunrise. The room is freezing. The lights don't turn on. The water is gone. Your phone shows one last bar of battery. This is not a blackout. This is a strategy. More than 1 million people in southeastern Ukraine live this reality. Not for minutes, for hours. In the middle of winter, this is how modern war works. It doesn't aim first at armies. It aims at systems, at power grids, at water pipes, at hospitals and homes. If you want to understand where war is heading, stay with me. Because what you're seeing here is not chaos, it's design. And the real question is no longer who fires the missiles. It's this: why is energy the target at all? To understand this war, we need to slow down for a moment. Not to feel, but to think. What is being attacked here is not territory. It is not even morale alone. It is dependency. Modern societies run on invisible systems. Electricity, water, heating, data, logistics. When those systems work, we barely notice them. When they fail, everything else collapses. Russia understands this very well. By striking energy infrastructure, the goal is simple: create disruption without occupation, pressure without direct confrontation, pain without immediate military escalation. This is not about winning a battle today. It is about exhausting a society over time. Winter makes that pressure sharper. Cold turns inconvenience into crisis. Hours become dangerous. Darkness becomes fear. And when civilians suffer, governments are forced to choose between resilience and compromise. But this strategy did not appear overnight. To understand why it works, we need to go back. Back to how energy became the backbone of modern power. Energy was never meant to be a weapon. At first, it was a promise. Heat in winter, light at night, industry without limits. But over time, energy became something else. It became central. Modern economies were built around it. Factories, cities, hospitals, communication, everything depends on a steady flow of power. And once something becomes central, it becomes vulnerable. Wars used to be fought over land, then over resources. Now, they are fought over systems. Electric grids are perfect targets. They are complex, interconnected, difficult to fully protect, and expensive to repair. One strike doesn't just break a transformer. It triggers a chain reaction, overloads elsewhere, forces emergency shutdowns, pushes systems beyond recovery speed. This is why repeated attacks matter more than massive ones. You don't need to destroy everything. You only need to prevent recovery. As Ukraine repairs, Russia strikes again. Over and over, a cycle forms. Repair, attack, collapse, and eventually exhaustion. This is the logic behind the darkness. And it leads directly to the first real crisis moment. Then the system finally cracked. Not all at once, but enough. Airstrikes hit again. And again, across southeastern Ukraine, power stations went offline, water facilities failed, heating systems stopped working. Suddenly, this was no longer an abstract strategy. It became a lived crisis. Hospitals switched to backup generators. Water plants rationed supply. Entire cities were told to limit electricity use. 1 million people were left without heat and water. In winter, in freezing temperatures, this is the moment where theory meets reality. Because backup systems are not solutions. They are breathing masks, temporary, fragile, and when attacks come in waves, there is no time to recover. As the head of Ukraine's largest private energy provider put it, they were living in permanent crisis mode. If this sounds familiar, it should, because this is exactly how pressure is meant to feel. If you want to understand how modern coercion works, this is the turning point. And it forces us to look deeper. Because what really matters is not the damage you can see, it's the mechanism you can't. What's happening here is not random destruction. It's systemic pressure. The real target is not electricity itself, it's time. And capacity, every power grid has limits. Limits on repair crews, on spare parts, on money, on human endurance. When strikes come faster than repairs, the system begins to fail quietly. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in delays, in shortcuts, in rising risk. Engineers work around the clock, but fatigue accumulates. Equipment is patched, not replaced. Backup systems become permanent. This is how resilience erodes. And there is another layer. Energy infrastructure is civilian by nature. It serves homes, hospitals, schools. Attacking it blurs the line between battlefield and daily life. Fear spreads faster than darkness because uncertainty is the real weapon. Will the heat come back tonight? Will the water run tomorrow? When people start asking those questions every day, pressure moves upward from homes to cities to governments. This is not about destroying Ukraine in one blow. It's about bending it over time, and soon that pressure spills directly onto ordinary people. Then comes the second surge, not louder, more precise, waves of drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, not one strike, but many close together, relentless. This is what overwhelms the system. Repair teams rush out, then stop, because another alert sounds. Fix one station, lose another. There is no military victory here in the traditional sense. No territory gained overnight, no decisive battle won. And yet, the damage compounds. Energy companies fall into survival mode, not planning, not rebuilding, just reacting. This is why recovery becomes impossible, because recovery assumes pauses, and there are none. Even leaders admit it openly. There is no military logic in these strikes. But that misses the point. The logic is not military. It is psychological and political. The message is simple. Nothing is stable. Nothing is safe, not even in your home. And as winter tightens its grip, another fear grows quietly in the background. Not just of darkness, but of what might be coming next. Now, I want you to place yourself inside this story. Not as an observer, but as someone living it. You are not thinking about geopolitics. You are thinking about your parents, your children, your neighbors. You check the radiator, cold. You open the tap, nothing. You charge your phone whenever power returns because you don't know when it will disappear again. This is what pressure feels like. Quiet, constant, personal. You are asked to be resilient, and you try, but resilience has limits. Every hour without heat is a question. How long can this continue? And at what cost? This is why energy attacks matter. They turn ordinary life into endurance. If you feel this moment matters, don't look away. Stay with the story. Share it. Because awareness is part of resistance. And as this pressure builds inside Ukraine, it doesn't stay there. It moves outward, across borders, across alliances, into the global system itself. What happens in Ukraine does not stop at Ukraine's borders. Energy systems are not isolated. They are regional. They are global. When one country's grid is under attack, markets react, prices shift, supply chains tighten. European allies watch closely. Because this is a test of whether modern democracies can protect not just borders, but infrastructure. Diplomacy accelerates under this pressure. Meetings, declarations, coalitions, promises are discussed, troops are mentioned, red lines are drawn, and immediately warnings follow. Foreign forces, Russia says, would become legitimate targets. This is how escalation works now. not through sudden moves, but through layered signals. Meanwhile, negotiations enter a strange phase, closer than ever, yet fragile. Talks focus on the final details: territory, security guarantees, timing, but missiles still fall. And that contradiction matters because the world is learning a hard lesson. Peace talks do not pause pressure. They often intensify it, and that brings us to the future. Not one future, but several. From here, the future splits into three paths. The first is the hopeful one. Energy systems hold. Air defenses improve. Western support remains steady. Pressure fails to break society. Negotiations reach a settlement. The war winds down, not because of collapse, but because endurance wins. The second path is more uncertain. Attacks continue. Support continues too, but unevenly. Blackouts return. Repairs follow. Then more strikes. Life becomes a cycle of interruption. Not total collapse, but constant strain. Peace arrives slowly, messy, incomplete, with unresolved risks left behind. Then there is the darkest path. Energy systems degrade faster than they can be repaired. Winter after winter. Public fatigue grows. Political pressure rises. Allies hesitate, not because they don't care, but because endurance has a cost everywhere. In this future, systems fail before armies do. And that is the deepest lesson of this war. Modern conflict is no longer about decisive victories. It is about whose systems last longer, whose societies bend, and whose institutions break first. Which path becomes reality depends on choices being made right now. And that leads to the final question: what does all of this mean for us? When future historians look back at this war, they may not start with tanks or trenches. They may start with power lines, because Ukraine shows us something unsettling. The next wars will not only be fought over land, they will be fought over systems. Heat, water, electricity, the quiet foundations of daily life. What Russia is testing is not just Ukraine's defenses. It is the endurance of modern society itself. And that question does not belong to Ukraine alone. Every country built on complex infrastructure should be paying attention. Because strength today is not just military. It is systemic. Can your society recover faster than it is pressured? Can your institutions protect the invisible things you only notice when they fail? Ukraine is answering that question in real time. In the cold, in the dark. If this analysis helped you see the war differently, don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. Question the systems around you. Because understanding is the first line of defense. And in the world we are entering, that may matter more than ever.